Good afternoon everyone and welcome back to another video. This week I am taking you through a couple days of my life as a working translator and writer, showing you guys what kinds of things I work on and what the field in general looks like. If you're curious about the field at all, or if you just want to do some productive work together this week, I think you'll enjoy this video. Before I get to working, I wanted to kind of tell you guys how I got started as a translator. And actually it hasn't really been that long. I only started translating about 2 years ago in the fall of 2022. For those of you that have been watching for a while, you'll know this, but I was a comparative literature student and a creative writing student, and so I was always interested in like languages and literature and stuff and studying it separately at school. But in terms of creative work, I was only focusing on writing and writing fiction, which is something I still really love. Basically in 2021, I read a book called 목소리를 드릴게요 by 정세랑. So it's like I will give you my voice or take my voice from 정세랑. That was the first like contemporary work of Korean literature I voluntarily read in my adult life, and I absolutely loved it, and I felt like it was really refreshing, like something I had never read before in, American literature, English literature. And so I started reading more Korean books, and then that naturally just got me more curious about like the Korean book industry, and I also started looking at more Korean books in translation. And I think that also happened to be like right when like people like Anton Hur and Janet Hong were publishing a ton of translations, and so I realized that this was like a thing that people could do, and that was so amazing. And in so many ways doing that, I felt like translation was so perfect for me. I grew up bilingual, I love literature, and I also was already writing, and so I think it didn't take that big of a leap into translating literature. I found it really fun. I feel like there's something very methodical about it, and almost like, doing a puzzle, which is what a lot of people talk about, or like a math problem. But at the end of the day, and fundamentally, it's a very creative process. And the most important thing about it is that you are a really good reader, which I think is something that I'm still learning, and like has been the most fun thing about it, is that you have to have your interpretation on the work that you're providing with your translation. And that's constantly challenging, but also so fun if you're someone who really likes reading. If you read books in other languages anyway, having your own understanding of why this work is so important or cool or beautifully written, and then trying to translate that into English, in my case, has just been so much fun. So yeah, but to get back to how I got started, I translated that first story, and I actually ended up submitting that story to a couple of places that I just looked up on the internet. I was like literary translator resources or something, and I'll link some really helpful resources and all the things I mentioned down below. Applied to a mentorship and a translators conference, and I didn't get the mentorship, but I got an email from the judge who was like, I actually really enjoyed your work. I just am not going to take it as like the one winner, but I want to have a call with you to discuss translation in this industry and what you're thinking. And sorry, I just turned off the light because it was kind of killing the vibe. But I just want to say this was such a pivotal moment for me, and something that has inspired me to this day is the fact that a working translator reached out to me and said, I see something in you, like even if you didn't win this, I see the effort that you put in and the potential that you have, and I'm going to help you navigate this industry. And it was so nice because I knew absolutely nothing. Basically, I won't go into too much detail, but the way translators work is that they are almost like free agents, and they're looking for books in the original language that they think would be worthwhile to translate, and also would do well in my case, the English language market. And then once you find it, you translate a sample, and then you submit that sample and sort of like a pitch to publishers in the English market. But before you do that, you have to acquire the rights to that work, which involves dealing with the publishers of the original text, being like, hey, are the rights gone? Like, can I translate this? Whatever. But what's really crazy about this is that there's no database or anything that's like, oh, this translator is working on this book, or this book is under contract, or whatever. So you have to do all the work of like asking around and hoping that no other translator is working on the same book you are, because that's just a waste of time on both ends. And then also you have to do the work of selling the book to the publishers in the US or England in my case, and trying to convince them to take it, at which point they might not take it, and all your work before that might have been in vain. So that call clarified a lot for me. It also showed me that this is not easy. I really thought that, there was like a certain pool of translators, and once you got there, people would be asking you to translate books, but I guess that was really dumb of me, because yeah, it's a lot more sort of competitive, and also just very self-managed and a little bit chaotic. So yeah, I got started translating that way, and after that I started translating more stories for fun, kind of trying to do samples, and I also submitted to a contest that I'll link below. If you saw my vlog from last December when I flew to Seoul, I actually won the Literary Translation Institute of Korea's like sort of emerging translator contest, and after that I've been getting some contract work for doing samples for Korean publishers. What's difficult about this, and I struggle with this literally daily, is that I actually don't have any of my translations published, which makes me feel so much imposter syndrome, and at times like I can't even call myself really a translator, but I am doing the work. I'm constantly translating. I just haven't been able to submit my things for publication yet. Basically, probably like any creative industry, it is so freaking difficult to break through. And Anton Her, who's like an incredible translator, my teacher at Bread Loaf, has said, called it the emerging translator valley of death. And I think it's the same for like writing, music, even YouTube. And I do find it a little ironic because I actually was interested in translation first because the writing world was really tiring me out. And I'll get more into that later in this vlog. But one thing I want to say about the translation world is that the community has genuinely been incredible. To be totally honest, coming from the writing community, which I found more difficult, I think by nature it's just a lot less collaborative. People are more defensive and sort of critical of other people's work and more competitive. There's a lot of ego happening with writing, which is valid, but I was getting really stifled by it and feeling a lot of pressure, and so kind of coming out of that and then joining also the translator world. Every single translator I have met has been like one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. And I think there's something that comes from working with languages maybe in different cultural contexts or something. Like people just tend to be very open-minded and willing to collaborate, willing to share information and sort of like navigate this like horrible publishing space together. And I have found that like sense of camaraderie just so incredibly nice, and it's what keeps me motivated even during the hardest times with it. The fact that there are so many people who are rooting you on and are rooting the industry on and are all doing their best to make sure that every translator is sort of, elevated at the same time, that is so rare for a creative industry. And so that's been my favorite part about it, is meeting other translators and stuff, which happens at like conferences. So in case you're interested in translating, I just wanted to say it's a tough industry. You're going to be doing a lot of like work that you're not paid for until the end and just sort of like fighting for your place within it. But if it's something you're passionate about, if you love literature, if you love languages, if you love the books that you're translating, I think it is worth it in the end, just because the other people are really great, and it's something in general that gives me a great sense of joy and like purpose in my life. And I think ultimately I just believe in translated books so much, and so I feel so honored to be working within it. So that was a very long story, but basically for this week I'm working on a couple of things. I'm doing an application for a mentorship, actually the same mentorship I didn't get 2 years ago. This one's called the Alta mentorship, and I'll link it down below as well. So I'm working on an application for that and then trying to polish up and finish 2 samples that then I can send out to publishers in time with their synopses and everything. So it's a little bit of actually translating, it's a little bit of editing up translation, and also sort of working on a pitch for the mentee application. Today I'm going to start with editing a translation and doing a first draft of like a chapter for another one at a cafe. So let's head over now and get some work done. You guys know that feeling of that 10 minutes every single night where you have to sort of organize your stuff, get into comfy clothes, like take your stuff from the day and like put it back and all this stuff. Low-key, sometimes that is just so hard, and today is one of those days. But we're gonna do it. I'm gonna finish up a tiny bit of work and then we're gonna get cozy and read and have a good night. is huge. I have finally found hot Cheetos outside of the US. For anyone who does not know, this is like my absolute favorite snack and I've been craving them for 3 months straight. But I went into a market in Itaewon in Seoul called Foreign Food Market, and they have an incredible selection of like tons of international food, including hot Cheetos. Was it $7 for this bag? I don't want to talk about it, but do I still have it? Yes. So now I'm trying to make this last for as long as possible. You ever almost tear up while translating a story? PMS emotions are crazy. Anyways, I've just spent the afternoon working on my mentorship application and the translation that goes along with it. It's a pretty gray day outside, so I think it was a really nice sort of cozy work sesh. But I think I'm gonna stop translating now and go get a couple books at Kyobo in Gwangun, which is very exciting, always super fun. I want to finally read Anton's Toward Eternity, which I'm super excited about. And I also want to find a book that I got contracted for the next little bit to translate a sample. They sent me a PDF version and I was debating just working with that, but I do like working with a physical book when it comes to reading and then writing a synopsis for it. So I was like, you know what, I'll just treat myself to the physical one as well because the book does look really good. And I think I'll spend the rest of the afternoon just sort of reading through as much of that as I can today. And I take notes when I'm doing it for a synopsis, so like, you know, major plot points, sort of the tone, etc., etc. I think that's the rest of my work day. But before I head out, I just wanted to talk to you guys about something I've been slightly struggling with, which is like how to manage like small/big tasks and sort of like the validation that comes from them. And I think this isn't just a freelancer thing. I'm guessing this is like a work thing in general. And maybe just leaving like the school system where you were validated for, you know, every little homework thing you did or like little quiz or test or essay that you wrote or whatever. I think something that's hard now is like all of my tasks are huge. They're projects, right? For example, even just translating a short story for me to get from start to finish, it takes weeks. And writing something that you're proud of and trying to publish it takes, you know, months and if not years. And although I do have quite a few things I'm working on, I feel like all of them are these huge chunks and I never get the satisfaction of like, I'm completely done with this one, especially as none of my stuff has been picked up for like full-length publication yet, and so it feels like a never-ending push on these sort of big projects. And I think, you know, first year post-grad, I've been struggling with that like lack of validation or just like sense of accomplishment that comes from these smaller tasks of like, I finished a reading, I finished my essay, but now it's like, oh, I finished 100-page sample, but it took me 2 to 3 months and I don't know where it's going now. And I know this is so normal for all sorts of people, but it's something I'm trying to get more used to and just also like get better at validating myself, being like you've done enough work for today, you're making good progress and something good will definitely come out of this. Like I almost have to tell that to myself. I think I'm just having a greater reflection about life being a series of like small and big tasks, and the sense of accomplishment obviously is a lot greater with the big tasks, but also doing the smaller ones is what sustains you over time as well. So I know it's silly, but for example, like going to yoga and sticking through it, or I actually think YouTube helps me so much because each video is like a much smaller project and I work on it over the course of a week. And so I think I feel an incredible sense of, you know, accomplishment when I get it up, and it's like that high of seeing people watch it and you guys interact with it in real time. It's honestly been bringing me so much joy and kind of like sustaining my energy while I work on these like bigger projects that hopefully will see the light of day soon. But yeah, I just wanted to share that here because I think it's, you know, all an adjustment. And if you guys are also struggling with like big versus small tasks and feeling that accomplishment and validation from yourself, I'm truly right there with you. And hopefully this can inspire you to just like give yourself a pat on the back because we are doing so well. We're doing so much and I'm really so proud of us. Yeah, so that being said, I'm going to close my laptop now, get ready, head off, and hopefully find these books. And let's have a cozy rest of our day. Today's look is heavily inspired by a photo I saw yesterday of Faye Wong. She honestly has like this unparalleled cool girl energy, and so I've been looking through a lot of her photos as inspo. They just had a black turtleneck under a leather jacket, and I was like, why have I never thought about that before? Like, for some reason I'm like, black on black wouldn't make sense, or it'd be like too much black for the outfit, but that's just like so not true. And I actually think the like differing textures is so cool. Anyways, thank you, Faye Wong. I originally had my hair up to match her, but then I thought a headband could also be really fun, so I went for this twist today. And yeah, I really like this outfit. Let's go downtown and get some books. Let me do a mini book haul for you guys. I mean, you've seen me get these yesterday, but I'm just gonna open this one up. There's another translator that I follow on Instagram, and his name is Jinwoo Park. He does a bunch of stuff about Korean literature and translation, and also like Korean American writers and Korean Canadian writers and things like that. But he has this whole thing talking about how like Korean books are packaged and like made in such like an unparalleled way, especially their like covers and stuff. And he gave a bunch of like really fun examples, but I think this is also a really good example. I've never seen this before, but there's like a little book. I think this is like a book of like interviews with the author and stuff, and done in like a really beautiful way. So you get like these little goodies with your book, which is pretty awesome. Something I really appreciate about Korean paperback books is that they feel so much sturdier than like American or British, like English language paperback. The stuff is really thick, and the pages as well are like pretty, almost like plasticky, if that makes sense, and quite thick. I think there's, you know, obviously pros and cons with both of them. These feel so nice when you're reading them. They open all the way and the paper just feels super smooth, but they get so beat up whenever I take them around in bags and anything. Like all my paperback books essentially just get trashed, whereas the Korean ones are so much sturdier, and so they pretty much stay in this condition. I'm super excited for both of these, especially Toward Eternity. This is Anton's debut novel. If you don't know, Anton Her is an incredible Korean to English literary translator, and this is his first novel. It's a speculative fiction work about a world in which there's a therapy that promises to eradicate cancer by entirely replacing the body cells with android cells, and that patients also become almost immortal. There's a researcher who receives that therapy, Yohun, who's one of the characters, and then an AI named Panit is the other character. Because Yohun teaches Panit like poetry, almost like creates him essentially, and I think it's like almost like a Frankenstein-y, but also I've heard very philosophical and like very literary speculative fiction, in the sense that it talks a lot about literature and its power, so I'm very, very excited about this. And I think this one is like a thriller, mystery, maybe even horror-esque, that involves an aquarium that the main character inherits, and then a mermaid maybe or something. Obviously I'll have to read and summarize this one, so I'll tell you guys more about what it's about as I do that, but it's always so exciting to get some physical books in my hands. Welcome to my very messy bedroom floor. I thought this would be a good time to talk about my writing and sort of how I manage it, as well as my translation and how I feel about the two things. For those of you who have been here a while, you'll know that writing has a really big part in my life. It's something I've been doing for a very long time. I did a creative writing minor in college, and I think that being a writer is probably the most consistent and also like sort of most big dream that I've had since I was a little kid, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate. To be honest, even now, I think it is the single activity that brings me the most joy in my life. Just like the most amazing form of self-expression, and still I find it so incredibly difficult. I think every writer is different. I know professional writers who write for like 8 hours on a day, like a job or whatever, but I think this has been a slow realization throughout my life that I find writing really difficult. I think it's really draining. It requires a lot of energy, and so I can't stick with it for that long through a day. And there's a lot of imposter syndrome that comes with that. You know, it makes me feel like I'm not good enough. I don't care about it enough to call myself a writer or to do it professionally. I think when I was in college, that combined with the competitive environment, the sense of ego, and in the end I just felt very burnt out and sort of like inadequate as a writer, which made me very sad. And actually that was a big part of why I started translating, is because I thought it was another way to express myself creatively that wasn't in such sort of like a difficult environment for me. That being said, I still love writing. I want to do it more, but I try to at least devote like, you know, a couple hours to it a week. I think I need to learn how to edit and revise better, but I'm currently drafting a story that I'm really having fun with right now. But if translation is a long, painstaking process, I think writing is doubly so. The amount of self-discipline you need to have to ideate, draft, revise, submit for publication, you know, get rejected a ton of times, and then keep editing and eventually find a publisher. And this might just be for a short story, not even like a bigger collection or novel. I'm sure a lot of creatives out there can relate, but it really is just like such a journey. I think the really good thing is I'm learning to have my own relationship with it. I'm learning that it's okay to take time. I think for a very long time I wanted to be like a prodigy and publish my first book at like 18 or whatever, and now I have a full draft of a book that I wrote as my senior thesis. Even 6 months later, I kind of think about it now and don't think it's necessarily the work that I want to put out. So I'm just learning to develop some perspective, spend more time just having fun with writing and not caring so much what other people think. And then actually the best part is that it goes so well with translation. A lot of translators are writers, as you could probably see with Anton and stuff. I think they both really feed each other. Practicing one helps you be better at the other. I also think they both come from such a love for literature, but the processes to me feel a little different. For me, translating is much more calming. It's a little bit more methodical. And I think it's because the work of like making the world, making the initial text has been done for you, and so now it's just about recreating it. But when it comes to your creating your own world, I think that takes a lot more time, energy, just emotions, whatever. While I love writing and I hope to be a published writer someday, I think I'm really grateful that it's not my only creative pursuit and not a full-time thing, even though people who are able to do that are very, very lucky. I think that for me, because it is a really precious thing, it's nice to not have so much pressure on it and to be able to really enjoy it. So now to wrap up this work week, I think I'm gonna do a bit of synopsis work on the book I got contracted for, and then probably get to editing this vlog before I have a little date tonight and just sort of, you know, enjoy my Friday night. I'll just say it here in case I don't get to say it again. I'm so grateful that you guys are here and coming along with me on this journey. Honestly, your comments on all my vlogs since, you know, post-grad and stuff have been so encouraging and inspiring. It just feels so good to know that we're all sort of in it together. We're figuring it out together, and we're trying to make time for the things we love. You know, that's a really difficult but also like super meaningful thing. I'm so lucky to be able to do it with you all. Okay, let's do one last work push and then we'll get to enjoy the weekend.